everyone, and welcome back to Anything Joe's, a collaborative journey through the world of G.I. Joe. My name is Greg Engel.
I'm Joel Thompson.
Record scratch noise, what? That's right, everybody. For this special episode of Anything Joe's, I'm joined by Joel from Order of Battle. We've been kind of silent on social media, so I'll go ahead and be up front and say that Jaron is on a leave of absence as he's getting ready to have yet another child delivered into his family. I wonder what the likelihood is that Jaron will listen to this episode, because that's directly correlated to how much trash talk I can put in this episode. So Jaron will be off this week, and he'll be off for our next episode as well, which we have plans for. And we wish him the best. I hope everything goes smoothly. We'll keep everybody updated with how that's going. They have until they're not due until the end of the month, so he still has a little time to kick back. They're working on their basement as well, which is going to be like his G.I. Joe room, much like yours, and they're redesigning and putting walls and stuff up, so I know he's got a lot going on.
Well, like Jaron being on a small hiatus from the show, my basement is on a hiatus until the price of lumber and building materials goes down, because
yeah, I totally understand that. So in the meantime, we thought we would take advantage of this to talk about something that is kind of of the four people collected in our two shows, we're the only two that are really diehard modern enthusiasts. So the bulk of this episode is Joel and I are going to talk about some of our favorite modern figures from the different waves of the releases. And we also took a look at the four most released modern figures out there and what we consider to be the definitive versions, or our favorite versions from those sets of those figures as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing that I have listed is the 25th anniversary. Is that what you have as well?
Yeah, so that was the introduction of what we would call the modern build. Pretty much, I mean, universally speaking, that's kind of around the same time that there was like an Indiana Jones line, a Star Wars line, that was really like a new breed of action figure.
Yeah, I can remember when this line came out being kind of hesitant about the changes that they made to the modern line, because the disassembly was completely different. You know, they made a lot of changes that when I look back at it now, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that it turned out like this. But initially, I remember I was just like so opposed to any change, which is actually really rich when you consider the Spy Troops and Valor versus Venom stuff. That was also a change. They were like, well, we kept a couple things, but we've deviated significantly. And for some reason, I didn't have as big of an issue with those. And those figures definitely have not held up well over the years.
You know, the foot pegs were the same. You could, swap out accessories for the most part, worked in either, the Real American Hero era or Spy Troops, with obviously some exceptions. At least they were still compatible across the board.
You're right.
Geez, some of the proportions in the middle years are... whew. But there was definitely still some... You could tell it was a G.I. Joe, even when they got really goofy. Where, if you take version 1 Snake Eyes and put them next to the 25th version 1 equivalent, it's inarguably Snake Eyes, but they're different toy lines,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also looking back, when we went into the 25th to go ahead and kind of start looking at what we picked, when I looked at the 25th, man, talk about things that didn't hold up very well. Stuff that seemed very forward. I think back of those old advertisements where it's just that Cobra Commander with his fist up in the air, and I was like, man, these look amazing. And I was looking back at them now, like, who do I want to pick? And I'm like, man, some of these are pretty bad. So when I was looking for the choices, I was looking for figures that I won't say haven't been topped, but are figures that I think have held up very well. So in each category, with a few exceptions, we picked 2 Joes, 2 Cobras, and 1 honorable mention that kind of I felt like speak for that line. And the first figure that I picked was Sgt Bazooka. That's based on Yo Joe rankings. That's Bazooka version 3. It was released in 2008 as part of Series 24. And it's just your standard Bazooka. He's got his red jersey with his 14 on it. There's really nothing. This reminds me of what classified figures look like now, where they really didn't try to skip a beat at all. They tried to make him look just about exactly like the original figure, which is not always something that I prefer, but I think in this particular instance, I do think it works. Looking at this figure up close now, where, he's got his backpack is, faithful to his original. The bazooka has been adapted a little bit, but I think it works really well. In the picture where he's like geared up, it all makes sense. It matches up. His face mold looks good, which I can't say for a lot of other figures in this line. I think he's a solid choice overall, and is not, and as far as modern versions go, I mean, maybe you could pick that one where he's in blue, the one that came out in 2015, but I think this is still the best bazooka in the modern wave.
He is one of the rare occasions where his first entry into the modern line, being the 25th bazooka, is, in my opinion, it is the only bazooka worth owning in the modern era. I'm excluding the Tiger Force repaint from the club. I hate the 50th one because they gave him the reduced articulation legs. And like that just, like I could move past the color to an extent, but like those legs with the single knees, which is funny because his 25th figure also has single knees, but he has ankles, where the 50th does not have ankles. And that, for me, is just unforgivable.
It doesn't look like he's wearing a jersey anymore. He has like a zipper and a collar. And yeah, I mean, the paint scheme I get is supposed to be like themed. Like, I don't even remember what the name of this subgroup was, but it was supposed
I don't think it had one. This was supposed to be a different tone. Basically, they had to settle on what this was, or they weren't going to arrive on time. I probably would have picked him if he wasn't already on your list.
Yeah, well, and he's also got the right structure. Like, he looks bigger than the regular figure. Like, he looks like a big muscular dude. And Leatherneck is the other character that always comes to mind, where I'm like, it's supposed to be kind of like a broad shoulder, like football player style. And I think that that's reflected really well in this figure. The other G.I. Joe that I picked, and I picked it for similar reasons, is Mutton Junkyard. This is another figure that I think holds up really well. Comes with all the accessories that you would have expected from like the vintage one, right down to the nightstick, the muzzle, the leash. He's got Junkyard with him. And this is it. This was like the only one this is in 2008. And they didn't make another one since. And I don't blame them. Just like Bazooka, I feel like that this figure, they pretty much nailed it right away. I'm not saying that there aren't improvements to be made. I'm saying that they didn't deviate. And the only other thing that really stands out is that he's got that thing on his arm to protect like from a dog bite. And it has it's kind of like, makes me think of like Major Blood's old mechanical arm, where it loses a little bit of flexibility as a result. But that's a minor nitpick. I think this figure is very solid.
He's got thunder thighs that really, really stand out from certain angles, but he is overall a very, very solid figure. And I do wish that he would have kind of got a Pursuit of Cobra treatment, where he would have got like kind of just a little kick forward. But I mean, overall, like, yeah, he's, again, he probably would have been on my list. No, I probably would have left him off because of his thunder thighs. I get a little bit, as we'll find when we start covering my stuff, I get a little bit, I'll just say psychotic when it comes to the proportions of the figures. But my Joes, I went with Dusty because he holds up very well in my opinion. He's not my favorite Dusty, but he is a great 25th figure. He came in the 7-pack, I want to say. No, he was in a DVD battle pack, excuse me. So he was actually relatively hard to get, I think, for a little bit. And I also loved the Montezuma skeleton. That was like a figure that when I finally got it, I was like cheering.
Yeah,
which is funny.
The Serpentor in this set, I think, is an improvement as well. It's just in general, I remember these sets, especially the one with Alpine, being really, really, really difficult to track down.
Yeah, the Alpine figure was nuts because then when they put him out in the 50th, people couldn't give him away because he was packed with army builders, and it was funny because they didn't put that crystal tip in the 50th pack, for which is like
the one thing
half the reason
people wanted it the most, right? Yeah, you built 90% of the mass device, and then suddenly your 5-part miniseries gets canceled because you can't get the last part.
And my second Joe is Zap, which he was in the 7-pack, the Attack on Cobra Island 7-pack, and he's just pretty much a perfect Zap. I mean, sure, you could swap him out with some hands with the hinge wrist and all that, if you want to get into my, psychotic brain. But that is just a perfect representation of a 1-to-1 carry forward of Zap.
I'm always so impressed when the designers resist the urge to flare up a character that is so iconically simplistic but in a way that works for him. So I think this figure is absolutely, I mean, certainly in my top 10. Just a really great rendition of a character that does not get enough attention, never has, probably never will. So I'm glad they didn't go overboard. The retro grunt that came out kind of recently was another figure that it never gets this good of a treatment. He just is a plain old green shirt essentially with a minimal amount of web gear, and for Zap I think that's perfect. Love the bazooka also.
And the face sculpt is actually part of the reason I chose this figure, is because that head sculpt is just as good as any modern era head sculpt. I actually use it on one of my modern adventure team customs just because it's such a, I mean, he looks old school because he's supposed to look like 82 G.I. Joe, but he's got that sharp little mustache painted in.
Yeah.
And it's
he looks great.
Yeah, I mean, that's he's truly just a gem.
He's a less is more. Like, I really do. I feel like he has exactly how, even the way like his shirt is like they've put detail on it to kind of make it look tight across, like form fitting, so you can see a little bit of the way the musculature is. I like this figure a lot. I like this whole box set a lot, except for the Outback.
Yeah. He's a figure from the 25th that held his value. I mean, now everything has gone up because G.I. Joe is on the crazy surge, but he is a figure that really, like, I mean, that 7-pack, when I finally got around to getting that 7-pack, it was not cheap.
I can imagine. Even paying retail for them at that time, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to afford this, because they put both 7-packs out at the same exact time, and of course the defense one is like 90% troop builders. So you're like, oh, I'm going to get a couple of these. Yeah, well, not anymore. You're not, buddy. Even then, it was tough to pull the trigger. Okay, so on the Cobra side of things, my first pick is Dr. Mindbender from the Defensive Cobra Island box set, the one non-troop builder that they made. And I really think that the lab coat Dr. Mindbender is a very overlooked figure, the one that they put out like in 2004 with the white jacket that buttons up. I wish we could see another Mindbender that looks like that. But in terms of like faithful adaptations, I think that this figure is really good. Head mold could use a little work, but everything else is kind of like in its right place. Also one of the like rare unshirt molds that exists out there, and certainly at this time it was. I don't really have a lot of complaints about it overall. I'm glad that they went with the cloth cape and it has the silver logo on the back, just like, this is another one that they tried to be kind of faithful. They gave him the little cattle prod thing or whatever that is. I don't know why Dr. Mindbenders never come with a brainwave scanner or brainwave scanner stuff. They always just give him the same old. I've never once seen Dr. Mindbender use this prod in anywhere on anyone, but he continues right down to the classified. He continues to come with it. You might as well give him dental equipment in terms of stuff. I mean, I've actually seen him do dental work. I've never seen him use the cattle prod. This figure falls a lot under the Zap category for me. It's a less is more. You and I pick apart figures in completely different ways, because figures that don't have like double jointed knees or whatever, it doesn't faze me at all. I just like the aesthetic look of the character and like kind of like the playability of how they make it. And I don't get, we'll see figures that really deviate from the formula and don't look like the originals at all, and I think they're excellent, but I do think it's a fine line to walk between advancing a figure and not making it going off the rails and it being completely repulsive. The other Cobra that I picked is Mercenary Wraith, the only figure of Wraith in the series, if not count the translucent variant. This is a figure that I didn't think would ever get made, and it got made kind of quickly after his introduction, which is good because we never see him now. He basically has been erased from the continuity, but I use Wraith all the time. I think he's such an excellent character. It was designed by Michael Turner, who has had years and years of experience in the superhero game. Did phenomenal cover art for this stuff, and this figure is a very good, faithful version of that. Like, it right down to his little visor flips up and you can see his little French face beneath it. Not something, we've got figures still that we don't have, like, I still don't have an airtight where you can actually see his hair. So, I don't have a barbecue without a mask on, period. So the idea that they went a little bit above and beyond to get him, to humanize him a little more, I think works really well. Also really like that gun he comes with. I don't know if that mold had been used previously, but you see it a lot now, or I've seen it a lot now. I think this is a great figure. And I have the translucent blue one as well, where it looks like he's like Predatorine, basically. And I think that stuff is awesome. I love stuff like that.
So when I was diving back into collecting, I was really just going on like characters I remembered and also just like what looked awesome. And when I first saw Wraith, I was like, I don't know who the hell this guy is, but like, this is awesome. And I grabbed it, and then I like found out that there was a chase figure. So then I was like turning around, and luckily at that time, most modern stuff was realistically pretty affordable with the exception of like, Alpine. And just in terms of standard retail stuff, because I hadn't even begun to even think about club stuff at that point in time. But the Wraith figure is absolutely probably one of the best 25th figures, period. And it's a shame that he never got revisited, and also that mold never got used again. I mean, I guess what could you do with that head outside of Wraith? But like, I mean, the face sculpt underneath the flip-up visor is like, again, one of the best of the 25th. And it's just, I mean, same with Zap. It's a disgrace that the head never got used again.
And I think that's part of what makes those figures so special. Like when you see them and you're picking them out, you're like, that not only is that a great head mold, it's uniquely Zap's head. Like you don't mistake it for any other person. And that doesn't happen a lot in the G.I. Joe world, where everything is available to be reused. It is a rarity. So yeah, I think for both of those figures, Zap and Wraith both, it's something that's, you look at them and go, man, that figure really is still very unique after all these years.
My side of the Cobra, picking the 25th was probably the hardest part for me on this exercise, because a lot of characters, I mean, they made a ton of characters in the 25th, and a good amount of those got a second chance with better architecture. But my first choice is the Bat, which they've never needed to upgrade. It's been the same mold since the 25th.
Yep.
It is truly, almost untouchable. And I guess, like, a couple years ago, I was like always hoping that one day we'd get a Bat with an articulated wrist and blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of like had like a personal moment where I was like, not every character needs ninja articulation. Like, it's a robot. Like, yes, he should be able to move around or whatever. But, that being said, for this figure to come out in the 25th and to be repackaged and redecoed all the way through to the end of the modern line. And sure, once in a while it would have been cool to get some new attachments, or maybe it like changed things up a little bit. But for the most part, they put that figure out in any colorway, and like me and pretty much the entire community were like, all right, we're on board. I'll grab a few more.
Do you think this figure would have benefited from having a lenticular instead of the like mechanical inner workings?
I think it's perfect the way it is. I think the lenticular thing is definitely, like, if you have the nostalgia for it, I get it, which being 33, I don't have the nostalgia for the lenticular sticker. Why it's my first pick for Cobra is that, there's that clear plastic chest plate, and behind it, there's tangible stuff. Mm-hmm. You can't remove it, or you can remove the plate, but you can't remove his inner workings, but they're 3D sculpted. It looks so good. It's, again, this particular figure is way ahead of its time compared to the rest of the 25th.
Yeah, I agree. I actually own quite a few of these. This and the Crimson Guard that came out around this time, I was like, these are pretty much exactly what I would hope for as far as troop builders go. And I'm already a big fan of the Cobra Bat just as the character. So, yeah, I was scooping these guys up. And then they also made both of the arms interchangeable, which was a new step forward. I thought was a really great idea. The
battle damaged head. I mean, we'll probably get into some repaint territory, but like the Jungle Bat is like by far one of my favorite figures. And it's like, it's just a repaint with some different gear, and they loaded them up a little different, but like seeing the Bat in like the jungle camo is like the imagination of like, imagine 5 Joes in the jungle and you just hear the Bats marching.
Like, yeah, just like not even like being stealthy, just you hear twigs snapping as they're just clawing through the forest, you know something's coming.
And they packed them with that giant like minigun. So it's just like,
yeah.
But my second pick is the Snow Serpent, which is a figure that got a lot of release in the 25th, and there was one Rise of Cobra repack, but then that was pretty much the end. No, there was one in the POC. He was a vehicle driver, but that snow serpent is a funny one based on what I say, because he doesn't have wrist. His lower arm articulation is halfway through his forearm to match his his furred glove.
Right.
But that figure is perfect. I mean, it looks exactly what it needs to look like. His gear is amazing. The backpack where you can store the
like missile launcher
whatever,
thing.
Yeah, whatever that is. That's somewhat mortar, somewhat I don't know. And just a simple AK-47, and he's got the parachute pack is removable. It's just such a I own a lot of 25th Snow Serpents, and he's always one that when I see him for like under $20, it's always a no-brainer for me to just be like, well, I'll just grab him. He's here. He's a great figure.
All right. What's one more? What's your honorable mention?
My honorable mention is the Red Ninja, because while it's not as awesome in terms of articulation as like the Retaliation Red Ninja, it is just a great basic ninja figure that I also probably have like 25 of.
Yeah, I like Red Ninjas a lot. I think it's a faction that is severely underrepresented in all of G.I. Joe, and it's not like if you're building a Snow Serpent, you have maybe 3, maybe 4 options that you can choose from. But this, in my opinion, is the only Red Ninja to troop build with. I think the Retaliation era ones look okay, but they don't look like a Red Ninja that I know. And this looks like the Red Ninja from the comics to me. And I do own several of these. I love them.
They did a really good job too they did that multi-pack, and they they changed they kind of separated the figures a little bit within that pack, where some of them have slightly different gear, slightly different paint jobs, but that is a 25th figure that I still troop build actively. I mean, all 3 that I've set off in my Cobra side, I army build all of them when I see them. And that's really saying something, considering the 25th has not aged that great, with a few strong exceptions. So let's talk about your honorable mention, because it is an amazing figure that I knew you were going to pick when we first talked about this.
My honorable mention is Nemesis Immortal, aka Nemesis Enforcer. Talk about a figure that I was not expecting them to release at this time. And the only Cobra Law that we got, prior to Pythona, this is the only regular release Cobra Law figure we got. And they did a great job. I'm real big about the stature of a character that's supposed to be big, like a Bazooka or a Nemesis Enforcer. And I think this is another figure that, if you put him beside Falcon, who he came in the 2-pack with, he kind of dwarfs him a little bit, and that's exactly how I would want him to look. There's also a lot of detail in a Nemesis Enforcer figure that I think is important. If you look at the vintage Nemesis Enforcer, he has those elbow blades. And on the vintage figure, they look like thumbtacks. They're embarrassing. Like he couldn't open an envelope with them. But in the movie, they grew. So you're thinking these are some heavy hitters. And so they did great service. They're not in the right place. I'm not going to fault them on that. But at least they did the job of making them more menacing looking. And they even they gave him the wings, and then they gave him the dumb little green tentacle backpack thing. I don't know what that. I had never known what that is. I've never seen it used. He looks like he's cosplaying as an octopus or something. But, I mean, credit for putting it in there as another little detail. I love this figure. I think it looks great. I wish that the modern line had gotten a full actualization Cobra Law. I desperately want to troop build the Cobra Law Royal Guard, and nobody else other than me is looking forward to that. I would love to see that happen.
I agree with you. I mean, Adam Ritchie's would be thrilled if they made a modern.
He collects a lot of vintage ones, and I do too, because they're so cheap, and that's the only one you can find.
There is a Fortnite figure that came in a box set of some sort. I don't know if it was a figure pack or one of their little build-up packs with the weird tiles that clip together to make somewhat diorama pieces. There's a head sculpt on a figure that looked really, really good. Would have been a great modern Royal Guard figure, but it was paired in a way where I was like, I'm not buying this $35 set to get that
this
figure.
One thing, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the next thing on our list, which is the Resolute figures. We only picked one of each of these because it's a significantly smaller wave than, especially compared to the 25th. The Joe that I picked from this set is the Scarlet figure. This Scarlet figure is weird. It looks so much different than how I envisioned Scarlet. And even her outfit, which shares a lot of similarities with previous Scarlet versions, it's one of those things where you're taking something that worked, and is classic, and you're only trying to push it forward a little bit. And I think that's what works about this figure. Even the head mold looks a lot different than I've ever seen Scarlet represented, but I think it works to her benefit. I wanted something that stands out, and Scarlet doesn't always get the proper treatment, I don't think. In the vintage line, she got overlooked pretty much completely. And her first figure is too early to have any detail. Her last figure is Ninja Force, and enough said there. So the modern figures, I think, have a lot of room for interpretation. Like, she's got the her ponytail. I think the blue is a good fit. If you take all her gear down, I think it would be a totally passable Sky Striker flat suit type thing. There's just something about it that's it's very sleek and stylish, but not overdone. I would change this head mold a little bit, but I like the interpretation of it.
Yeah, I mean, Resolute is a funny one because I remember catching half of it because they put it on Cartoon Network in 6-minute segments or something. Mm-hmm. And that was when it was live, so in 2009. But then when I came back to G.I. Joe and was diving in, I watched Resolute and I was like, man, that's awesome. This is what a great story. And then I watched it a couple of years ago and I was like, I still enjoy it, but it's kind of that little reminder that it's oh yeah, if G.I. Joe is a little too serious, it kind of loses a bit of what makes
it so special. Yeah,
so great. And it's that being said, forget the media. These figures are top tier. This was a huge turning point in the modern line. This is where we're starting to shift. And the next segment is rhizocobra, so we'll talk about that when we get there. But this was definitely the shift where they were, because these don't look like vintage figures. These are based off of a 2009 animation. Mm-hmm. The Scarlet figure is, up until the vintage one, and I guess one that came in one of the Transformers crossover sets, was the best Scarlet until, I don't know, 2015, maybe? Mm-hmm. They took the heels off her boots, which I am always a big fan of if it's a female in combat, let's give her combat clothes.
Sure, dress like a soldier.
I mean, Baroness is a whole different topic, but Scarlet doesn't need to be running through the battlefield in heels, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But this figure is amazing. My choice was Roadblock because you made a comment earlier, and I agree with it. Stature is important when you need a hulking character. And this Roadblock, number one, the detail is so sharp. The 25th Roadblock is really bad.
Yes.
Again, my opinion.
No,
if you like it,
it's
good on.
Worldwide accepted opinion, I would assume, at this point.
I mean, the 25th head sculpt for Roadblock is so undersized, it looks like when Beetlejuice's head gets shot. But this, I remember just looking at the images of these box sets from Resolute and just being I wish I had these. And this was a great victory when I finally got them and I opened them because the figures delivered. And specifically, this Roadblock is untouchable. I mean, it's honestly, up until the Retaliation era, there is no better Roadblock.
Mm-hmm. This figure makes me think of when I was a young kid and we played vintage figures. I had a friend of mine who would always compare the biceps of vintage figures and would be like, oh, Road Pig has bigger muscles than Sergeant Slaughter, so he's stronger. This was his way of thinking. And when I see this Roadblock, I'm like, these biceps will take on anybody. Yeah, this is a great figure. The only thing I would change about this figure is that hand that's specifically designed to hold that huge gun. I feel like you limit what you can do with it otherwise, but in terms of appearance, it's solid.
Yeah, it's a great head sculpt too, which again, the 25th was such a weak figure. But anyways.
So on the Cobra side of things, I picked the Destro from this set. The Destro from this set, if you're not familiar, he's wearing a jacket and he kind of has a kilt looking design on it. And it's a pretty radical reimagining of Destro. I've never really seen anything that quite looks like this. And there's something about it that really sells it. It makes him look more military. like it's almost like, you know, you've got different versions of Destro. You have Destro the businessman, Destro the advisor. I feel like this is like Destro the commander. Like if he's actually out on a military mission, this is how he would dress. And I love this re-envisioning. In general, if this line didn't have a movie to back it and they were selling it as just a re-envisioning or alternate reality or something like that, I think it would have sold just as well. Like I don't need this to be connected to the movie.
I mean, I'm going to chime in here because there's a lot of details on this figure that make it. And I pushed him to my, spoiler alert, honorable mention because he was
my regular pick.
Yeah. So he's wearing like an old school, like Cold War era Russian long jacket or whatever country, you know, it's not Russian, but it's a long jacket that does in fact look like a kilt. But he has dual pistols that work. He comes with one of my favorite modern accessories, which is this like tactical briefcase that has a laptop with a flip-up screen on one side and a removable submachine gun on the other side. And he comes with a robotic arm because you can pull his arm out at the shoulder and pop in this robotic arm, which is directly from, you know, the media. But like I said, I had to jump in because part of the reason why he was only my honorable mention is because you had already picked him for your favorite. So
what a crazy, you know, it's crazy that they did this idea with the robotic arm, something that completely eluded me when it came out. It was such a foreign concept that I was like, what is this for? Not replicated at all in any other way. Would have been is a great idea for a Major Blood, right? Make a regular arm, make a bionic arm, type, you know, best of both worlds. And you know, disconnect it from the media and like I said, you kind of envision it as a retelling or an alternate universe where he's lost an arm in combat and he has to replace it. You know, in the comic book, he lost his hands and had those replaced with robotic hands, so it's not, you know, too far flung of a concept. This is a solid figure. One of my favorite figures, just period.
My favorite is Zartan. This Zartan has got all the future stuff I love on him. He's fully clothed. He's armored out. He's got glow-in-the-dark eyes, weird little port on the back of his like chest armor, but on his back glows. He comes with a weird little like multi-effect hand rocket launcher that he used in the show. He comes with an awesome sniper rifle. This, for me, is probably my definitive Zartan. I have a Kit Bash custom that I've made that I want to revisit when I get my collection dug back out. But the 50th Zartan is a great figure, but this figure for me, I still like more than probably any other modern Zartan straight out of the package.
Yeah, you know, Zartan is maybe my favorite character in Cobra, full stop. And so I have almost probably every modern version of him there is. And I like a lot of things about this one. I do like the armored up look, and I do like the way they've like integrated more technology into that, which makes way more sense when you think of Zartan, the hologram based illusion, that he would have the requirements to fulfill that kind of technology. You would think he'd be wearing all kinds of crap to make it happen. So I like that aesthetic. I think this also feeds into the like Devil's Due era where Zartan actually can't get into the sunlight, or in the cartoon as well where he would like turn blue. That this outfit leans into that kind of mentality where he's like completely covered up so no sunlight touches him at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I continue, it's just going to become a very boring conversation. Me being like, I love this figure.
So we covered your honorable mention since it was the Destro. My honorable mention for this wave is the Flint. And for all the reasons that I like all the other figures, I think that this is also, the reason this is just an honorable mention is I do think this figure has some room for an improvement. I don't love this tactical vest thing that he's wearing, but all the other stuff that he's got going on, I think is a really solid fit for a character that, you know, Flint doesn't really get a lot of evolution as a character. He kind of, you know, almost all modern versions kind of lean into the same design. And so this is one of the few ones where he actually looks way more kitted out for combat, right down to the like little bracelet thing he's wearing. It's got ammo on it.
That is one of the best additions of accessories in the modern era, is that like forearm ammo.
Yeah.
Whatever it is so good.
So the next thing on our list is the rhizocobra line. You know, the interesting thing about the rhizocobra line is that there are obviously a boatload of movie characters tied into this, but they expanded the line so quickly that they made tons and tons of characters that have nothing to do with the movie at all. And I think almost all of my choices are the non-movie related characters. So I'm going to let you go first on your Rise of Cobra picks.
I saw Rise of Cobra at a midnight showing when it came out originally. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I have two older brothers, and so my brother was like, hey, we have to go see this movie. I know you like G.I. Joe. Let's do it. So I was like, all right. So we drove an hour and 30 minutes each way to watch Rise of Cobra, and I had to work at like 6 a.m. the next morning. I was working at a Dollar General at the time. And I remember we like watched the movie and we both left and were like, yeah, that really sucked.
Now we have 90 minutes to lament our life decisions.
Yeah. And he, like, he grew up on the cartoon. I had a little bit of exposure to the cartoon, the original cartoon, and then I had almost all of those like CD-ROM DVD sets that came with the Spy Troops and Joe vs. Cobra era figures or whatever. But that, like, even for my main source of media as a child for G.I. Joe being the weird CGI, like, what the hell is going on era of G.I. Joe, like, even like Rise of Cobra was even too much for me. But all that to say that there are some absolutely amazing figures in this line as a whole that I just completely ignored anything Rise of Cobra packaging for like the first year and a half of my collecting, because I was like, I remember seeing these figures in the stores, and like specifically that, like, I think they call it a steel crusher, which is just like an armored Humvee. Mm-hmm. But like I remember seeing them and being like, well, this is stupid. It's just a Humvee with like extra armor bits. Like, I was like, why isn't it something more like, high tech? It's for Cobra. And now I'm like, yeah, I could have grabbed those at retail and clearance instead of like trying to find one for under $100.
It's such an amazing vehicle. Like, even used in the movie, it's just like a practical, no nonsense. It's the kind of thing that as a child you're like, there's really nothing. There's no spring-loaded missile launcher thing to really pull me in. But as an adult, you're like, this is perfect. It's so real.
And I mean, it has the door, the breakdown door missiles on this, and I love that stuff. Anyways, enough about that. My first choice is actually from the movie, surprisingly, but I think the breaker that they put out is just a great figure, and it's a really good and unique head sculpt that has never been used again. And I don't know. See, now I'm going to say something out loud. It almost looks like just a slightly repainted Channing Tatum head, which I don't think they would have done.
Oh, wow. Considering you're right.
I know that it's not, but this is a great head sculpt, and it's actually a very good and just basic figure. Definitely. I mean, and it comes with a laptop, which is the type of accessory that I love. The rest of his accessories you can throw in the garbage, but the laptop is awesome, and it's a very well-rounded basic figure. I definitely took the vest off of mine, but that is my choice.
This figure is this is the first figure that you've picked where I'm like, I don't know. He's almost like too. Actually, let me erase all that. The thing that really throws me off about this figure is that it's not the breaker that we know. It's a new character. Yes. He has a completely new real name. So it's not supposed to be our breaker. And that's very off-putting to me. Like, don't know how to utilize him, properly in my Joe-verse, because I'm like, well, I have a breaker. It's not this guy. I do love this laptop. I am also same thing with that Destro. I'm a big fan of those little practical accessories that anybody can use. And whereas that Destro one was branded as Mars, this one has the like movie era G.I. Joe logo on it, which I think is very cool.
This figure is not my like breaker in my Joe-verse.
Sure.
He's another guy, but he's also a figure that I ignored for a long time because I was like, this is not breaker. And then when I finally like got the figure, I was like, this is a great figure with a great head sculpt.
I do think that head sculpt is great. I think the reason it resembles Channing Tatum is just a product of the time where they were pumping out so much stuff at the same time.
So many Channing Tatum heads.
Yeah.
Okay, so my second Joe is Kamakura, which yeah. He's not in the movie, but this figure rips.
Yeah, this figure rules. I think this is the first figure after the original green one, right? The one that does not hold up well at all. The one that
I think so.
The one he has the like body of a football player on a ninja. It's real weird. But Kamakura was a new figure, So at the time, it was still excited to have him. But this one really solidifies the concept of Kamakura. Even though you're right, wasn't in the movie, wasn't even really being probably used that prominently in the comic at this point. And they changed his color.
I do wish that he was green instead of the rhizocobra gray-blue.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, again, not that everything needs to be based off of money, but, like, this figure has always been a minimum of 4 times retail for as long as I can remember. And even now, he's climbed up quite a bit. This is a great figure that they still use. You know, that torso has been used right up through the 50th.
Yeah.
Not the rest of him, but that armored torso is cool. And we've seen a lot of his accessories reused in some other favorites.
Yeah, I do love this figure. In terms of Kamakura, I think this is it. Like, this is the Kamakura that, there's nothing else that even comes close to the quality, detail. The accessory set is awesome, right down to the swords with the, ornate handling at the bottom of them. If he was green, I would say never make another one ever again. But I've learned to live with the idea that he just wears blue now.
He is by far, in my opinion, the definitive Kamakura in the 4-inch modern line.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll also, to back up to what you said about difficulty of finding, this is a figure that I had to buy in the secondary market. And at this time, I worked beside a Walmart. So I would go into a Walmart every day, 7 days a week. I would go into a Walmart. So I didn't have a lot of difficulty. I won't say I didn't have any difficulty, but it was rare for me to not be able to find something on the shelf. I hit it so regularly, never saw this figure. Not a single time.
He like I said, he was always a chase figure because he had nothing to do with the movie, and he was just an awesome figure, regardless of the character. This is a 10 out of 10 figure, just standing on his own 2 feet.
Yeah, I completely agree. On my side of things, the 2 Joes that I picked are, the first one is not a surprise, Agent Helix. I'm not going to pretend like the character of Agent Helix has not really influenced this choice, because Helix is easily my favorite post-vintage new character. Like, I remember seeing this character for the first time on the shelf and being like, oh my god, it's a new character and it's a female and it looks great. This is before, of course, her head mold was used 25 times. I mean, like, literally every female after Helix is like, well, here's G.I. Jane, but she's just a blonde, don't sweat it. Or, here's the female Daltone, don't worry about why her neck doesn't match up right. But at this time, this was one of the most exciting figures I'd ever seen. This figure to this day is still the figure that, if I'm just goofing off and I want a figure to play with, this is always the figure I go to. It never fails. The 2 the semi pistols she comes with that she can pose with, I don't know, there's just so much posability in it. Even looking at the provided shots, they have also done the same thing where they've got her doing a bunch of different stuff with the guns, where she's holding them both straight out, or she's posing at the side. I think the design of the outfit is solid. I could probably do without the little, it looks like she's wearing like a bustier or something, but the gray and black scale with just a little bit of yellow, and then the hair dye for the different colors. I think this is this is an 11 out of 10. This is one of my favorite modern figures ever made.
I will chime in to say the only knock against this figure is exactly what you just said. The weird bustier bondage,
yeah.
I don't understand the choice, but with the exception of that comment, this is a perfect representation of a female combat specialist. She has combat style boots on. She's wearing form-fitting clothes. She's not again, outside of I'm assuming the lower torso piece is supposed to be some sort of armor against swords and gunshots and whatever, but there is definitely some weird breaking points on the top half of her torso that, like you said, raise some weird questions. But yeah, this figure is absolutely amazing. And it really set the standard for female figures in the modern line.
Yeah, it's criminal that by the time this character had really kind of become more defined thanks to the comics, that they never really revisited it. Like they really leaned into the ninja aspect of it in IDW, where her and Snake Eyes were always fighting side by side. I would have liked to have seen a redesign of this outfit for like ninja stuff. Doesn't have to dress her like a ninja, but just like get rid of all these buckles and pouches and stuff, and really like kind of like mainline it.
Yeah, it would have been really nice to see them expand on her as a character within the toy line. But a lot of the times when we get new ideas, the vocal majority doesn't enjoy them, so we don't get a lot of time for some really great ideas to expand.
The other Joe that I picked is Rampage, aka Heavy Metal. I also have a very big soft spot for characters that either have never made the jump to modern or are essentially forgotten characters, and I think Heavy Metal / Rampage is one of those guys that this has fallen to the wayside over the years, doesn't get used in anything ever. And they spent so much time getting this figure right. Like, the jacket looks good. He's finally got a removable helmet. The head mold is not flawless, but the other stuff is so spot on that I think it makes up for it. He's got like his green dress shirt on.
Do you know whose head that is?
I do not.
That is, I'm pretty sure that's Mutton Junkyard.
Oh. Well, that would explain why I like it so much, I guess.
And the bazooka head and the mutt head are like very similar. I would have to see them right next to each other, but like that, I was going to make that comment earlier when we were talking about them in the 25th section, but I didn't. And then I remembered when you said Rampage, I was like, oh yeah, that's Mutt's head.
Maybe I just like guys with mustaches. Maybe I'll take a helix and get a mustache on her and see if make a mustache crew. He's got the removable cartridges for his gun as well, like the clips that come out, and that was not something that we were seeing a whole lot of at this time. That's not even, I mean, I'm not even going to get into the fact that he came with the Rhino, which is just like one of the most badass vehicles that was underrepresented at the time. Such a cool like repurposing of that existing mold in a way that works. I mean, like, it's great.
Everything you just said is a prime example of how great things can be when you have fans of the property who also work on the line.
Yeah.
Because that Rampage figure didn't come from somebody just like scratching their head. That Rampage and a lot of the Easter eggs dipped into the rhizocobra line are because the people working on Joe loved G.I. Joe.
Yeah, I agree. Somebody had the foresight to say, this vehicle will sell itself. You can put any character you want with it. Let's design a character that we don't already have 50 versions of and put them in there. And sure enough, I mean, I would have bought this regardless, but things like that always tip the scale. I'll buy the worst vehicle if it comes with a character that I've got to have, but the reverse is not true. I won't buy the best vehicle if it has a really crappy figure. All right, so let me hear your Cobra choices.
Okay, so we have some crossover here.
Okay.
We both have the Night Adder.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about him first then.
Now, I'm going to say my piece, and I'm sure it's going to basically be the same from you,
okay.
So we'll do this together, but this is a brand new character, and it is such a good, like, Frank Joe, with the exception of the head, and we got some representation because it is a black dude.
Yes.
And he comes with, he's security, and I love the idea that he's security that comes with a tactical shotgun and a giant dog.
Yes. It makes so much sense.
I have Army build the crap out of this figure, and I do not have the variant, which drives me nuts because he's covered in tattoos, but you can't really see them on the standard version. The variant version has a blue ink tattoo.
I didn't know that.
This figure is exactly what I loved about when the modern line, when the wheels were rolling full steam ahead, because we got throwbacks to classics, we got modern versions of classics, and then we got just new stuff that, as much as we love G.I. Joe, I think we can both agree that there are definitely a lot of things that got missed in the vintage era.
Yeah.
In terms of Cobra security. Boom. Here we go. So go ahead and talk about Night Adder.
So, if there's one thing I love, it's a character that's a blank slate. And if it's an extremely well-designed character like Night Adder is, I'll just go crazy. For many, many, many years in my mythology, Night Adder literally lives on Cobra Island, does the security there, patrols at night, sort of like the way Crocmaster is always kind of seen wandering around, except Night Eaters actually takes his job seriously and isn't a psychopath. Like, this is one of the few things where, normally you go to a file card and you glean any information you can off of that. But if you'd never read this file card, if this didn't have a file card, and I'll put this up on the YouTube so people can see it, but the card art for this character speaks volumes. You just look at the front of this card art where he's holding his shotgun and his head is tilted down. You see a little bit more of the realism of how that helmet is supposed to look. He looks so badass. Like, I'm just immediately envisioning exactly how he behaves and how he works. I've been doing so for years. He's one of the best, like, original modern characters, full stop. He just is. He's just exceptional.
And I mean, the reason that I didn't take him off my choice is because the amount of love I have for this figure is, when I saw that you had chose him, I was like, I don't care. Like,
yeah.
This is probably my favorite Cobra, Rise of a Cobra figure, period.
The detail where you take his vest off and he has tattoos like all over him, on his chest, on his back, stuff that you would not see unless you started to mess around with this character. That's a level of detail. I was just complaining a couple episodes ago because I bought a $160 3-0 figure, and when I took Storm Shadow's wrap off, it doesn't even have his freaking tattoo on his arm. That's so lazy. So this is a perfect example of what the other side of that looks like, where somebody went at the the bare bones and built it up, and they don't care if you saw it or not because they knew that they put the work in.
So my second choice is the paraviper, which was invented in the 25th anniversary, and it's just one of the best. Again, it's a new character. It was brought in the 25th. It's phenomenal. I left him off because the bat and the snow serpent are also just favorites of mine. So this colorway in the Rise of Cobra is essentially, it's a repaint of the 25th, just in black. And he comes with a weird handheld helicopter drone thing that launches a missile. But his actual gear that ties into the character is some of the best gear, period. And I'm interested to see, if you're looking at the picture of him, if you recognize his forearms from a photo that you have shared with me recently.
Dude, I don't. I am not a parts person at all. Is that Mutt's armored thing? It looks like that.
In that Snake Eyes custom you just got, where we went over the head sculpt stuff.
Yeah.
These are the forearms that he used.
Are these often used, or do you think they came from this specifically?
They're from this figure and this. Well, there's there's the 25th version and this version, and I'm pretty sure that's the only time those forearms were used.
I like that on the detailing of this, on his suit, he can actually store his flippers behind on his little web gear has a spot to kind of root him up there and hold it in place.
All right, so I'm just going to talk about it, but they're the same exact figure, just two different colors.
Okay.
When I first got my hands on this figure, and those flippers clip in there, it is just, this is everything I want in a toy. He's got a paragear. I mean, outside of a working parachute, which is cumbersome to store, and it's like you can't display a giant cloth parachute anyways, but this this figure is just, it's just perfect. I like both of the color schemes on this. I like the blue, and I think the black is a little bit better, mostly because the blue one has this orange on it, which I think would have benefited from being a different color, but it does still have like a Cobra blue to it. They are exceptional. The amount of stuff that this guy is wearing is wild. And again, this was a thrown together concept for the 25th. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have a GI. It doesn't have lore.
Right.
It's just it was a missing thing. It's like, let's give Cobra a paratrooper, please.
Sure. Yeah. Stop throwing these bats out of the planes and letting them break on impact.
So, all right. So now we're on to your Cobra section.
Okay, so we already talked about Night Eater, so that's a gimme. My other Cobra is the Monkey Wrench from the Walmart 2-pack set with Tunnel Rat. This is a weird figure because you would have expected there to have been a Monkey Wrench already at this point. And I don't love this head mold, but it's very, very, very often referred to as a Chuck Norris figure because it does bear a striking resemblance.
And Outback.
Yeah, a little bit of an Outback in there.
Well, no,
that's true.
It's the Outback head just with brown hair.
Is it? It's weird because it looks like a better Outback here than the Outback figure that I actually have.
Yes.
But there's nothing out of this world about this figure. He's not loaded down. He's got his blue jeans on. He's got his jacket. That's another bare chested approach. They went in and put the like newer dreadnought tattoo on his arm, which I think is a nice touch and is a very small level of detail. I don't know. This was just a figure that I felt needed to be made. It's weird that it ended up as an exclusive 2-pack, and he comes with such a they didn't give him the weird 3-prong gun that he came with. They make a kind of a modern version of it. It's almost like a harpoon gun. I think it works really, really well.
That figure was a thorn in my side to get for the longest time because he was so expensive. I'm not saying that he's not a great figure, because he is a great figure, but he just for the price that he demanded, I just couldn't justify it because it was just a Franken-Joe. Mm-hmm. And I had already had... Who did he come paired with? Was it Tunnel Rat?
It's Tunnel Rat.
But I had already got Tunnel Rat loose in my collection, so it was one of those things. And it's not... And exactly what you just said, I didn't need a second Tunnel Rat. And for the price of that 2-pack carded, I just could never pull the trigger because I already had the Tunnel Rat. It was already really expensive. And when I finally got the Monkey Wrench and I got him, I was like, this is such a solid figure. What a pain in my ass. So,
yeah,
he's a special one for me because he took me years to get at the price I wanted him.
Yeah, all of those 2-packs, regardless of demand, were not easy to find. Same thing with those. They reissued the Law and a lot of the Cobra surveillance port. That stuff was all really hard to find as well.
They were expensive back then, and they're still crazy expensive now. And they reissued that Roadblock in one of those awesome little playset 2-packs. And I think the distribution by that time with those packs, they were I think one of them was a Walmart exclusive, maybe one was a Target exclusive. I'm not remembering 100% accurately, but they were definitely some of those sets that no one could find, and they just automatically skyrocketed, and especially because they had that cool mini playset element.
Yeah, not just a new thing either. This was old 1982, 1983 stuff.
Yes.
Outpost Defender, laser artillery weapon, surveillance port. This is all stuff that was we had not seen since then. So it was very cool.
So my honorable mention is Ice Storm, and part of that is because I freaking love the submarine that he comes with, which is this weird little sci-fi
It is actually used in the movie.
Yes, it is, and I love that. Was one of my favorite parts in the movie was seeing those little subs and the way they were animated in the movie. But yeah, that's I like environment specific figures. They did a lot of really good Arctic figures in the Rise of Cobra line, and there was a really good shipwreck. There's a really good dock. There's even a really great Arctic Snake Eyes in the Rise of Cobra line. But Ice Storm, for me, there's just something about him. I love the high collar on his winter jacket. I love the submarine. And it's just a very... Again, I love when a toy line can take existing parts. This has a new head, but the rest of it is just cobbled together parts, and if you paint it the right way and you put it together the right way, I don't look at that figure and say, okay, well, this goes here, this goes there. Come on, give us something new. I'm this is a great figure.
Yeah, this is the only set out of this line, because this is from the canceled line that just showed up kind of randomly at Ross's or whatever. This is the only set out of that wave that I went out of my way to pick up because of this guy, who I think is exceptional.
Did he exist before this?
No, this is the only Ice Storm, and the only other one they ever made was a con. They made a con version.
Dynamite figure, but... So again, it's a new character.
Yes.
That was made.
Just for this. And then canceled.
And then thrown in with a really weird but neat vehicle. So yeah, I do... That is something that I like listening to when I'm listening to branded content, anything Joe's.
TM.
Your love and appreciation for unique and new characters is something that inspires me when I'm looking through the stuff that's coming out and looking through the stuff I had. And I appreciate that you shine a light on a lot of things that, most people would just consider this kind of it was a It is what it is. It was made. It's a new vehicle driver. The movie sucked, whatever.
If you were building a diorama that was like an underwater base and you had like, I don't know, 5 of these just like populated around, I could even see somebody repurposing this as like small like emergency shuttles like in space or something like an emergency evacuation thing. I think it does have a lot of use. Is criminally underrated. And I guess same thing with Ice Storm. That perfectly great figure that would round out like an Arctic team of people that you know have the usual suspects, and then also now you have a guy that you can kind of imprint on however you want. All right,
perfectly stated.
Okay, last in the Rise of Cobra line is my honorable mention, and much like Rampage, I went with Sergeant Thunderblast, aka Thunder. Another figure that I was like, holy crap, Thunder, a figure that never gets made. Came with a remade Armadillo, which they're calling the Armored Panther, which is a small vehicle set, which is also great. If you, in a set like this where I'm like, I don't really want another Armadillo, but I'll pay anything for a modern Thunder figure that I've never seen. This was a figure that I also picked up on the aftermarket later on, which there aren't a tremendous amount of. I don't think I even knew this existed at the time because I never saw it at retail, but I was so won over by the design of the character that I picked it up on eBay right away, and I love it. It's not, it'll much like even less like Rampage. Thunder's design is extremely simplistic. It's not something that you can mess up unless you go overboard, and they didn't. I mean, like the helmet really sells it for me. It really makes him look like Thunder.
That is a very solid set and a really good use of existing parts to get another character into the line that we were never going to see if it didn't come exactly how it came.
Agreed.
So we're going to roll into Pursuit of Cobra, which is inarguably, I'd say, probably the best.
I mean, we're getting to the good stuff, essentially. Pursuit of Cobra and 30th are rock and rolling, yeah.
My favorite era of modern G.I. Joe, period.
I think most people feel that way, and justifiably so. Yeah, I mean, it really is exceptional.
POC specifically, they took some steps forward and they gave us redesigns of characters, and that is really what I love about the Pursuit of Cobra.
Look at what they're doing right now, where they were like, oh, we're going to try something new and classified them, and of course, and then they've shifted with public feedback to go to just be like, all right, never mind, we're just going to make them exactly the way that you want them. Forgive us for trying something new. But Pursuit of Cobra is an example of how you can do that and it be successful, where you really are putting the time and the attention into modernizing a figure without alienating his personality. There was a bit of a awakening happening here, but much like with when they delayed the second movie because they wanted to put it in 3D, it shifted the figures away from the movie and it messed everything up. And I think this had a similar experience, that it suffered because it wasn't tied, that it didn't all connect at the same time.
So who are your two Joes for the Pursuit of Cobra picks?
So my first Joe pick is Spirit Iron Knife. Talk about a re-envisioning. When you look at Spirit, has gone through a couple of different transformations, like in the Devil's Due era, he wore all black, and he was like a lot more of they leaned more into the tracker aspect of it. And I also think that as time progressed, they wanted to rightfully maybe pull away from the stereotyping that comes with the original Spirit. And although maybe lean too heavy into the Predator aspect of it with this figure, I do think that I think the concept of the figure is there. As a matter of fact, I don't mind that it looks a lot like Predator figure. The only thing I would change about this figure is the white dots on his pants. I think would look better if they were like a tiger stripe or, a little bit more of like a military camo. But I love his head mold, and he's got his bandana on. He looks actually more like a dude that is in the jungle, actually hunting and tracking. They gave him a cool machete, they gave him his arrows, but they gave him a machine gun too. He's loaded for just about any scenario. They gave him those snakes that he can hold. It's just loaded with detail.
I mean, 3 of your picks are heavily Predator influenced, and yes, this figure is definitely a smile and a wave to Billy from Predator, but also, that being said, it is also a very respectful representation of Spirit as a character.
Mm-hmm.
It nails all the marks. It plopped it in a way that we all want it. I want Spirit to look like he's doing his job. I don't need him to be wearing mix and match cultural things tied together.
Sure.
And it's the same. It's my same sentiment with Scarlet, like give her boots, give her real boots. Like she's out there kicking ass,
right?
Like,
Nobody's running in these.
That spirit figure is just amazing.
It's wild to me that this was a Toys R Us exclusive, came out in 2010. They revisited it in 2012 and put him in that Slaughter's Marauders pack and took a step backwards. He looks worse in the more retail release than I think the Toys R Us one does. Still not a bad figure, but I think that I chose this one specifically because I think it is just a lot more aggressively true to Spirit's character. The other Joe that I picked is also very Predator influenced. You are correct. It's the Recondo remake. I do like this Recondo a lot. If I was talking about defining characteristics of Recondo, I would be, yes, his mustache. I do see that there's a recurring theme here. And his cool little hat is like jungle hat. And those are the two things that they kept, and everything else they kind of moved forward. He doesn't exactly scream like jungle expert, but he does look a lot more prepared for a firefight, essentially.
Well, he's got the jungle bear traps, and he's got his solar-powered backpack. It just, one of my all-time favorite figures, even with the weird, his neck leans forward, and they fix that when they reuse the torso, but I don't even care.
This is another amazing set. Just like Spirit comes with those snakes, Recondo has this, Aboriginal tribal mask that he can wear to fit in with the people of the jungle or scare away outsiders. What a crazy detail. You would never see something like this nowadays. It's so wild and so beautiful. I'm in awe of whoever came up with that idea.
And he has the hatchets or axes or whatever. I don't know the technical term, but they clip to his vest. He's got the satellite GPS device clipped to his vest. That figure is legitimately in my top 5 of standard retail G.I. Joes to ever have come out.
Dude, if you took this wave and made a modern animated or even live action G.I. Joe series and used these designs, I think that is the perfect melting pot of being the entertainment industry doesn't want things to look exactly the way the toys look. We want to make it for a broader audience. I think this is that appeal to a broader audience.
I agree. So my first pick is Beachhead. And this Beachhead, not only does he come with a small arsenal, he comes with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 large guns, 1 pistol. It is a Beachhead for a urban environment, and he's definitely a departure from the Beachhead we know, but he is a departure that I love. He has one of my favorite vests in the modern line. He comes with these weird flippers that he puts those on, and they I don't know if anti-gravity is the right word, but they hold him in place.
Oh, I thought they were supposed to disguise his footprints or something so people couldn't track him or they would think he's an animal.
I'm pretty sure that there's some sort of high science. I don't know. Again, the Pursuit of Cobra line did this. They added the G.I. Joe that people forget, which is a few steps into the future.
Right.
There, he comes with a crazy laser rifle that is one of my favorite guns that I think is criminally underused.
Yeah, I was just reading on his file card. It's described as a UPR urban plasma rail weapon, which is pretty cool.
And I'm pretty sure, and those flippers, I'm anti-gravity flippers or something, where they plant him in the spot, so when he's using that plasma rifle, he stands his ground essentially. Yeah,
the cool thing about this Beachhead is that it is so noticeably everything about it is so definitively Beachhead. I can look at this and see, if I look at that Recondo, I think, well, it could be other characters, but I look at this Beachhead, still very, very revitalized and modernized, but still is very true to his character. Makes perfect sense that Beachhead is the type of character you would expect in an urban tactical response. And you want something that's different than the staff sergeant vibe that you always see. There's a Beachhead that is training and recruiting and teaching people, and then there's a Beachhead that's actually in military combat. And I think this much more accurately represents the Beachhead that's actually getting into a firefight with somebody.
Yeah, exactly. This is Beachhead in action. My second pick is Skydive, and this figure, I army build this figure. I also have a large amount of those Beachheads, but
do you army build this as skydives, or are they like just a trooper, like a paratrooper?
Essentially, when I get all my stuff out on display, I will probably change the head sculpt on one skydive, so he is skydive, and then the rest of them are just Halo jump troopers that work with skydive. But this figure is, again, very much like the Beachhead. Like, he is in the future. He has got a crazy winged jetpack. He's got an amazing clear helmet where he has 2 hoses plug in. I'll never forget the first time I saw this figure hanging on the pegs, because I didn't know who or what Skydive was. This figure was one of the huge determining factors that pulled me off of buying the old school Marvel Universe figures into just completely switching to G.I. Joe, because they were the same price. And if you take a single carded Marvel Universe Wolverine and you pair him next to Skydive, they're getting your bang for your buck with one of these figures and not with the other figure.
I don't know if this is the first figure that utilized this, but I am a big fan of these jetpacks, these like wings that pop out. It doesn't matter who it comes with. I'm always like, these look great.
So who are your Cobras?
Okay, so the first Cobra I want to talk about is Storm Rider. So Storm Rider is another original character that came out. He's a dreadnought, and he came with a really cool bike that we would later see the club repurpose for the Zartan, the Ninja Force Zartan. Well, it started here. This is such a cool. I got a thing for figures that don't go overboard, and especially if it doesn't make sense. Like, dreadnoughts are just essentially a bike gang. So it makes sense that if you've got a dude that's an actual biker in a bike gang, that he would be dressed just like a kind of a normal dude. And he is. He's got jeans. He's just wearing a black shirt. He's got a cool tattoo on his arm, like a really cool tattoo. Actually, he's pretty detailed. They gave him a mask so he could cover his face for a robbery. He's got shades on. He's got like a little faux hawk. He's got white hair, which suggests he's like older than the average dreadnought. I think this dude has a lot of character right out of the box, and is a character that I come back to a lot. Always shows up around, like if I'm doing anything with the dreadnoughts, I always throw this guy in because I just think he's got, even if you were just using him as generic dreadnought dude, he stands out in a crowd. You could troop build these and do some head swaps, and like on the back of it, if you take his vest off, on the back it says Dreadnoughts Australia on the back. I think that's a nice little touch too. Yeah, I think they nailed this dude. He works in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people.
Yeah, I mean, again, they created a new character for a vehicle, and it outshines some of the standard figures that we love in the line.
Yeah, this is another, like, I don't have any issue with this motorcycle. It has these weird blades that come out from the back. I'm not in love with it at all. Like, if I didn't have it, I wouldn't care. But I really do like this figure a lot. It's a figure that I think about often when I'm thinking about the Dreadnoughts. A figure that just has not been used ever at all. And that stuff drives me crazy. Just perfectly good stuff on the cutting room floor, basically. The other Cobra I picked has got to be one of the most talked about Cobra figures that still to this day doesn't get is not in any form of media at all. Criminally shameful. It's Shadow Tracker. If I had to stop right now and say, what's your favorite modern figure ever? I think it would be this guy. This guy is got everything I want in a figure. He's super cool. First of all, like they gave him dreadlocks, something that you never see. Or like they gave him a mask, but it's translucent to give the hint of his face behind. And like where his eye holes are at, his eyes are like just solid glowing white. Why? I don't know. You have to write it for yourself because we don't know anything about him. His weapon set is absolutely insane. He's got a net to catch people, and he's got one of those little bolo things where you whip it around and it wraps around somebody's legs. They also gave him a bow and arrow. He has tons of like cutting weapons. He is basically like, if the other characters I picked were from the Predator wave, this is the Predator, essentially.
Yes, that was when I was like, you picked 3 that are heavily Predator. In terms of standard release modern figures, it's definitely in the top 5. You'll probably, anybody listening to this or anybody who's heard me on my own show, you'll quickly realize I love army builders. And I'll go back to back. My 2 picks for the Pursuit of Cobra wave for Cobra were Alley Viper and Jungle Viper. The Alley Viper they modernized him only in the sense of changing his colors, because he is the exact same as the 25th, which was already a modernized version of the original in terms of gear and concept, but not in terms of color. But they still gave him maroon, which, gives us the Cobra vibe. It's red, it's not standard military. And that figure just comes loaded with the gear. I actually have one of the only pre-production things I own is a buddy of mine hooked me up with a test shot of a Pursuit of Cobra Alley Viper. So he's in all the random colors of this figure. So he's got maroon parts, solid gray parts, black parts, but I guess that's all I can say without just repeating myself. And then Jungle Viper is, again, it's a new character. It's a new troop builder. It is high science to the highest degree. And I recently found out that gun, his giant gun, is based off something in real life. It is a gun that is, I believe, designed to eliminate tanks. It'll shoot through a tank and destroy the engine. But yeah, the crazy high science, the crazy active camouflage that, the Jungle Viper is, again, something new, something insanely inspired, and just something that I wish would have got a repaint.
Talk about swinging for the fences with the design. Whoever made the concept for this and then actually executed it to such an excellent degree is to be commended. Just unbelievably convoluted, but just when it works, it works. When you have him sitting down, he really does look like he's just going to blend in on a shelf somewhere.
So who is your honorable mention?
So my honorable mention is a character called Ashiko, which actually I guess I lied when I said that I only picked up Ice Storm from the canceled wave. I picked this figure up. I didn't know about this figure, first of all. That's how incredibly canceled he was, that I didn't know this had hit Ross stores in 2012. And when I found out about him, the thing that intrigued me is that he's actually supposed to be part of the Arashikage team as a new member. And so I was like, oh, wow, I really want him. And it was only then that I learned that he's got a whole other gimmick. He comes with a bike, and that bike breaks down and turns into armor. And it's pretty, you talk about high technology, it's borderline Transformers era stuff, but it's such a cool figure. If you don't mess with any of the bike stuff, and you just streamline his chest plate, because it has these two big ports on it where it locks stuff in. If you alienate that or replace it with something, which you could easily do with a Wraith, it's just a modified Wraith shield plate. He looks awesome. He's basically completely armored up and ready for battle. Now, how you tie that in with the Arashikage is at your discretion. He does kind of look like a guy that would maybe train with Commando era Snake Eyes, because he's both knifing and gunning at the same time.
That figure and the scout, the Hiss Tank scout tank thing, that is the same canceled wave. Finding those was such a chore, and both of those sets delivered. This character, I will say, gearing him up in the pulled apart motorcycle is definitely a bit finicky, but I love the look of that motorcycle being this weird sci-fi bike, and I love the idea of having this future ninja as part of the Arashikage clan.
All right, so tell me about your honorable mention.
My honorable mention is, surprise, another army builder. The Cobra Shock Trooper is an amazing home run at giving us a modern-day Cobra trooper of sorts.
He's sort of like an amalgamation of a trooper and an alley viper, because they've outfitted him for urban stuff.
Yeah, he comes with all sorts of amazing gear, a riot shield that is one of my favorite accessories, a sledgehammer, double taser cow prod things, his gas mask being translucent, and the way all of his gear clicks together and works is just it's just flawless, and it is by far one of my favorite troop builders.
This is by far the troop builder that I hear you talk about the most, day in and day out. It seems like it comes up a lot, which I know they did reuse a lot of parts.
Yes, they've used his parts for a disgusting amount of figures, but his parts really do work well, and it is an insanely articulated figure.
All right, let's keep pushing ahead. We're going to get into the 30th anniversary. Why don't you go ahead and tell me who your picks are, one of which we share, I believe.
Okay, so for my 30th, we have on the Joe side, we have Stalker, which this figure is one of my all-time favorites. I have made a good amount of my style of kit bash LBC customs with this as a base body. as a representation of Stalker, I think this is dynamite. They definitely brought Stalker from 1982 to the modern day. You can look at that and know that it's Stalker. He's, it is Stalker. He's got the green camo. He's got the beret. He's got his Stalker gun. But they gave him this amazing web gear with a machete. It is just one of my all-time favorite figures, and I made like a really cool jungle-based Snake Eyes custom with this as a base body. I use this as a base body for my Range Viper customs using just the head and the helmet from the rhizocobra canceled Ross exclusive, whatever you want to call it, Range Viper figure, because I think this just green camo, highly articulated. It's
people push back on the dreadlocks on this a lot. What do you think about that?
I think it adds a new layer to Stalker. It adds like Stalker is one of like the main G.I. Joe dudes.
Yes, absolutely.
And I would expect him to be like, I have no issues with the dreadlocks. I think, if anything, it adds to who he is as a character. He holds his core values and he holds himself and the team to high standards. And it doesn't, I don't have any issue with the dreadlocks. And I think, I personally think it adds to the character. I think it adds to...
It fleshes him out a little bit. Yeah, I see that.
I mean, it just adds to like, he is who he is. And like, he's going to wear that hairdo because in this rendition of him, that's him.
Yeah. Okay. Who's your other pick?
Lifeline.
He's my pick too.
So Lifeline, this figure was very hard to get, as I'm sure you'll say when we get to your portion of talking about it. But this is everything that I love in a modern figure. It is inarguably Lifeline. The fact that I'm choosing Lifeline as a favorite it just goes to show you the quality of the figure. I don't have this insane love for the character of Lifeline, but I have insane love for the figure of Lifeline.
Yeah, the accessory set that comes with this Lifeline is just out of control. Defibrillator paddles, like a stretcher, like there's an IV bag, stuff that we had not seen with Joe's before. Just out of this world.
The amount of story that comes with this character right off the bubble is untouched.
Yeah. There's a reason. I feel like there's a reason this figure was hard to find, and that's a big part of it. Is that there were no. This was our first modern Lifeline, and they just really, really knocked it out of the park. Ties in with the other figure that I picked, which is Sci-Fi. I have always enjoyed the character of Sci-Fi, and in the same way that they tried to evolve what Lifeline comes with, they did the same thing with Sci-Fi. Like he has like these interchangeable helmets, so he can actually have like a full like blast shield over his whole face. They were taking what exists and then they're like, this is how we feel like it would actually function, and it works so well. It's such a cool idea that I would have never thought of on my own, and to include it as an extra is something else. This is such a good build. They even very subtly toned down the green on him. I won't say it makes it more believable, but it's just like we're going to take it just one shade closer to real with him.
Sci-Fi and Lifeline are two of the most sought after and amazing figures from this line, and I think if you talk to any G.I. Joe fan, it would be funny to hear people like chasing down and fighting over Sci-Fi and Lifeline.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move into the Cobra side of things.
So we have the Viper and the Trooper. They are in my eyes, definitive of both of those characters. They're two of my favorite builders. They were brought forward while still representing the vintage.
So on the Cobra side of things, it's all dreadnoughts. Both the two Cobras I picked are Burnout and Xandar, both of which come in the same Dreadnought 7-pack, one of the best 7-packs ever made, full stop. Every figure that they put in this set was necessary, like wanted, and delivered. Burnout, who's from the old like Spy vs. Spy, Venom vs. Valor era, a great creation. They took that design and concept and then actually made him like a legitimate modern figure. Took him from a figure that nobody really knew about from that wave. And there's a lot of figures in the Spy vs. Spy, Valor vs. Venom era that don't hold up very well, that I think are very good characters. And Burnout is one of those where the figure is like, it's okay, but this really took him into the next level for me. Like when I got this figure, I started using him all the time because he's super cool. He has a really great design set. He also has like detailed tattoos like poking out from underneath his sleeve. His weapon set is pretty minimal. Like it looks like they're kind of building him up to be a flamethrower guy, which I guess makes sense since his name is Burnout. I've actually never connected that until just this second. I guess I always just thought he did drugs or something. I don't know. But I think he's a great figure and is, again, he's not overdone. He's simple. I think Dreadnoks always just will dress kind of like very simple gang style designs. I say that, but the other character I picked is Xandar, who literally looks like he just crawled out of a florist. But, you know, it would be easy to take Xandar, who has a lot of outlandish stuff going on, and be like, we can probably fix that. And they didn't. They said, let's leave it exactly the way it is and just make it look modern. And they did. Xandar is a figure that I would not have expected to get made in the modern cut. He always gets left behind for all the other successful characters that start with a Z. And so I love him. I don't even think the pictures do this justice. I think the actual figure in hand is absolutely a winner.
The team behind the Slaughter's Marauder 7-pack and the Dreadnought 7-pack would become Boss Fight Studios. Mm-hmm. And they're lifetime fans of this brand, and it shows. And a lot of the praise that I threw out earlier about loving the brand, and it's because they loved the brand, and that's why Xandar is one of the best modern figures, and everything you said about him is accurate. But yeah, I mean that 7-pack is amazing, and Burnout is amazing, and it's yes. My honorable mention is the Steel Brigade Delta, which was paired with the modernization of the Vamp, and that Steel Brigade Delta is just so sharp. I love the fact that we got a different faction of Steel Brigade that is tied to a vehicle, and you can buy as many as you want, because I love that Vamp and I love that Steel Brigade Delta, and I like that it's a troop builder that comes with the vehicle instead of a named character.
This makes me think more of like Pit Commando, but with a little more of a tactical advantage. Pit Commandos always kind of remind me of the dudes that are on guard duty. These guys actually look like green shirt plus, sort of like guys they would actually trust to send into battle.
What I really like is that helmet is kind of pulled from the DTC era of Steel Brigade styling. And I like that we got two variations of the Steel Brigade in the main line, and then we got an alternate helmet giving him the name Delta.
I do like that alternate helmet quite a bit.
So who is your honorable mention?
My honorable mention? Guess what? It's a Dreadnought. It's Zanya. So Zanya is a character that as soon as G.I. Joe #1 came out from Image Comics, I was immediately like, what an awesome figure. Great design, cool concept, a little bit of like mystery behind how she got there. Where had she been all this time? And just like Wraith, I was not a figure I was expecting them to come out with at any point. So for her to be included in that 7-pack and is done in a really just like straightforward way. When it comes to this figure, she could be wearing just about anything. It really came down to what that head mold was going to look like. She's a complicated figure. She has facial piercings. She has dreadlocks that are multicolored. And for a design at this time, I think they really knocked it out of the park. Even if you were unhappy with the body mold, which I'm not, I think it looks fine. I mean, it's basically a Zorana. I think the head mold really sells it. This is another one of my favorite modern figures. Well, I complain a lot about all the figures that we didn't get in this line, because you reach a certain point where they brought the retro wave in, and I thought, oh man, we're finally going to get some characters we never got before. And then when that crapped the bed, I immediately went back to 5 years ago when I'm like, man, why didn't they make these modern figures? But we were lucky to get figures like this. I could not make a custom of this figure. It's complicated as hell, and I certainly couldn't make a Wraith that lived up to it either.
The Dreadnoks are too specific to easily make customs of. I mean, if you really get into customizing as a whole, I've seen a lot of amazing customs, but you and I are a different breed of customizers. So
yeah.
Yes, that is well said.
Just in wrapping this part of it up as we close out the 30th anniversary, I could have picked any figure from the 7-pack. I think it's one of the best, for bang for your buck. It was literally 7 modern figures that we had never had modern versions of before, and they really brought something special to each one of them. All right, so that's going to bring it to the end of part 1 of Best Modern Figures of All Time. Joel and I will be back to discuss everything from the Renegades era on, as well as discussing what we consider to be the best modern figure of the most produced modern figures, and we hope you'll join us for that. Also, in addition to that, if you disagree with any of the things we have on our list, if you'd like to talk about some figures that maybe we overlooked that you think should be considered, feel free to drop us an email at anythingjoespodcast@gmail.com. You can leave a comment on our YouTube video here. You can talk to me on Anything Joe's Pod on Twitter. You can leave Jaron a message on Anything Joe's Pod on Instagram, although he probably won't know what you're talking about. Joel, if our listeners want to get a hold of you and complain about your choices, where can they reach you at?
If you go to the Order of Battle Instagram, that's where I'm at. And I'll just say this in case anybody's coming in with guns blazing. It was so hard to only pick 2 and an honorable mention. It pained me, but that was the point of the challenge. So trust me, I guarantee you if you message me and are like, well, I think this figure's amazing, I'll probably say, yeah, you're damn right, it's amazing, but I had to narrow it down to 2. So
the list definitely wiggles a lot. I'm sure if I went back and revisited it even now, I would maybe feel differently about some things. When we get to our best of the 4 most produced figures, I've got a lot to talk about because I really did wage some personal inner wars with who I was going to pick for some of these characters.
Alrighty, well then I look forward to coming in for part 2 and potentially another crossover.
All right, so that's gonna do it for us here. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in just 2 short weeks, or anything's available for discussion here on Anything Joe's.
General Hawk, do you read me? This is Doc at headquarters. Great news.
Jaron had his baby.
Looks like we made it. Men, Doc says
Jaron's baby is gonna be A-OK.
Yo!
Look at the sky. The last of the mutation spores are burning up in orbit.
Thanks.
Fellow co-host.
Let's go.